Shanti, are you all happy? What if there is no death? What if God did not create something called death? So, how would we feel? Because this is the question that comes to our mind, especially when we lose our beloved ones. Superficially, the answer seems to be that if everybody be here without dying, then the world will be filled with people that there will be no place left for the newborn ones. But is that true? It doesn't hold true, because it's just the biblical version of asking this question or answering this question. But in reality, everybody who took birth and who died, they are still here. They have taken rebirth and they are here, which is why the population keeps on increasing no matter what. So what happens actually is there is a limited number of souls in the soul world called Parandam or Parlok. It's from here souls slowly come here and take birth. So once it starts taking birth, it will never go back till the destruction of the world that happens only at the end of the 5,000 year time cycle. So we are near that now. So this world was heaven in the beginning for the first 2,500 years, and the next 2,500 years is hell. So God comes in the end. He enters an old man's body and start giving this truth, knowledge to everybody, that this world was created in its most perfect form called heaven in the beginning, and we were created in our most perfect form called deities, filled with the divine qualities. So that's how we were in the beginning, but after taking several rebirths, we lose the power, soul power, because of which we lose the external beauty and peacefulness, blissfulness and prosperity, health, everything. That's because we lose the soul power. It happens automatically for the first 2,500 years, because anything that we use gradually becomes old. The same applies to the soul, the power of the soul. So, but what happens in hell is the power of the soul gets decreased at a faster rate. The reason for that is we become slaves for the five vices like lust, anger, greed, attachment and ego. So that's how we lose the soul power very fastly, because of which we face so many problems in terms of health, wealth and natural calamities. So here in hell, because of falling into vices, which is called sins, we are experiencing punishment either in that same birth or the next birth. So that's how we have been accumulating sin after sin. So we are filled with sins now, and God comes in the end to liberate us from the punishment for the sins we have committed so far. So He teaches us the way to get liberated from the punishment of the sins. How do we do that? Because sin has this peculiar nature of making us commit more and more sins so that we get more and more punishment. So God removes this tendency to commit any more sin. For that we have to realize that what we do is sin. We should be able to differentiate between the sinful act and the non-sinful act. Whatever act we perform while we are in body conscious, that will obviously be sinful act. So whatever act we do in soul conscious stage, that is considering ourselves to be the soul as we were in heaven, we will not be committing any sin. So that's the basic difference. So that's why in heaven we don't commit any sin. moreover we'll be filled with blissfulness and peacefulness, because the very nature of soul itself is bliss and peace. But by forgetting the fact that we are soul, after completing the first 2500 years, we become fully body conscious. So we consider ourselves to be this perishable body and become slaves for these sensual pleasures, because of which we become slaves for these 5 vices: lust, anger, greed, attachment and ego. So the more body conscious we become, the more sins we accumulate through these 5 vices, and that's why we are burdened with sins, and that's why we are facing all these problems. Now comes the topic: what if there's no death at all? So what would happen if there is no death at all? For example, if so the number one soul in heaven is Sri Krishna. So if you including Sri Krishna, everybody has to take rebirth and enter hell, and has to face all the sufferings and sorrow that we see daily. So for example, if we take the Krishna soul, instead of taking rebirth, if this soul doesn't leave its original body, what will happen? Which means there is no death for that soul. So what will happen is, anyway it slowly becomes old, right? But if it did not leave that old body, what will happen is, it will rapidly become old. It will rapidly become sinful. So to understand that, just consider your life. How were you when you were born? You were very pure, right? So only when you grow up, gradually all sinful things enter your mind, and before you die, you have become fully sinful being. So if there is no death at that point, what would happen, right? So when we die, as soon as we leave this body, the soul enters another's body in a mother's womb and start taking rebirth. So what happens inside the mother's womb is, it undergoes the punishment for the sins he has committed in his past birth before leaving that old body. So he will be given visions of all the sinful acts he performed, and he will be punished there. So those, it actually enters the womb in its 4th month. Till then, the body that we see inside the mother's womb is without the soul, the lifeless body. So only after the 4th month it comes into life, because the soul enters it. So from the 4th month till the 10th month, there is a span of 6 months, right? So this 6 months period is the time for punishment for the soul. That is why every baby, when it is delivered, it always cry. We don't cry for no reason, right? There should be some reason. So it is getting punished continuously inside the womb, which is why we are feeling that shaking of hands and legs. It's not dancing, it's actually trembling with fear when it's punished by God inside the womb, by seeing those frightening visions. So he'll show the vision of the sins he has committed in his previous birth, and also the consequences of that in the next birth, that will also be shown to him in advance in the womb. For example, if he was a very rich guy in his previous birth and raped many girls, or sexually used many girls with or without their consent, anyway it is sin. So in the womb, God will show the vision of what he did, and also show the vision of the punishment for that. What is that punishment? He will be born to a prostitute in a very poor family. So just think for a moment how a man's mind would be when he knows that this is going to be his future. So that's the punishment he will be facing throughout the 6 months. So on seeing the punishment, he will be begging to God, please leave me, please forgive me, I will never commit any more sin. That's what he would be saying throughout the period while he was in womb. But as soon as he comes out of the womb, what he enters is the sinful world. So obviously he has to become a sinful being. But he forgets everything from the past. So when he is born as a newborn baby, he is somewhat pure compared to the elderly beings. So God makes him pure in the womb, then he delivers him out. As a result, for him to become sinful, it takes many years, right? At least 15 to 20 years. So that's how God protects this world from getting overwhelmed with sinful acts. That's why there is something called death. Death is nothing but changing the body. Not only that, also purifying the soul, mind and intellect, they are present in the soul. It gets purified. So that's going to help for the world to sustain a bit longer. Or else what would have happened is, in heaven, of course, there wouldn't be any sin, but as soon as they enter hell, what will happen if there is no death? They start tasting these vices, lust, anger, greed, attachment, something like that. So what happens is, if he becomes an enemy to somebody, so he will always see him as his enemy. So that grows to the extent that he wants to kill them. So he will become that cruel. In the very first birth itself, if there is no death at all in heaven, in hell, obviously he would be very criminal. So to avoid that, there is something called death. Even in heaven there is death, but they don't call that as death, because since they were soul conscious, of course there is no death for soul, right? And they consider this body as just a cloth for the soul. When it becomes soul, they will be more happy to get a new cloth, that is the new body. Before dying, they will have visions of the newborn baby that the soul has to enter. So they will be very happy. Anyway, there won't be any trace of sorrow or pain in heaven. So everybody there will be rich, peaceful and blissful, and it's filled with treasures. Even the stones would be made of gold, so there would be golden palaces, but with no windows and doors, because nobody knows what stealing is, what cheating is. Everybody would be as pure as kids. So that's why it was called heaven. That's why we build temples to the deities without even knowing that it is as in the beginning that we were born as deities. So now we know how the world has become. So especially this lust. So people, they don't bother whether a girl is married or unmarried, whether it's a kid or older women. They don't bother. All they want is lust. So that's the state of the world now. So if there were no death, world wouldn't have lasted this long. As soon as the hell appears, the world would have finished within 200 to 300 years instead of 2500 years. Because their mind gets so corrupted, they couldn't forget anything, so they will become more and more criminal day by day. So just to avoid that, there is something called death. So God doesn't create death, it is nature. So God's role is in the end and also in the womb. In the womb, he will be giving visions, But here in the end, God Himself comes and enters an old man's body and gives this knowledge so that we can purify ourselves. Instead of going to womb and get purified, we have to purify ourselves fully, thoroughly. How do we do that? By remembering God as a point of light, and also by listening to the teachings of God. Yes, the teachings of God is called Murli. It's available in all languages, in all Raja Yoga meditation centers that spread across the globe. You can Google it for the one that's near your home. And also you can Google Murli in your language, English Murli, Japanese Murli, Chinese Murli. It's available in all languages. So listen to it daily and remember God as a point of light so that we can conquer death, which means we will still be leaving one body and taking another body in heaven, but still, since we were soul conscious, it wouldn't be called death. So this heaven is called the deathless world, as promised by Bible, Quran and all religious texts. So to enter that, we need to purify ourselves before that in this very birth, because this last 100 years is the only chance for us to purify ourselves. This is the only time where God Himself comes and gives this knowledge to purify ourselves. And the method is very simple. Just we have to consider ourselves to be this imperishable soul and remember imperishable supreme soul, God Shiv. And this God Shiv is called Allah by Muslims and Heavenly Godfather by Christians. So God is just one. So God comes in the end and converts the human beings of Kali Yuga into the Satyug deities. So deities are not God. God is one who made us into deities. So I hope you would have understood what if there is no death at all. So I repeat, if there is no death, it doesn't mean the world will be filled with the population that there is no place for anybody to even stand. No, that's not the case, because everybody is here. But if there is no death, then we wouldn't be punished intermittently in the womb so that we become more and more criminal, and the world would have get destroyed pretty soon. So it wouldn't have lasted for this long. So that's the reason death exists. Om Shanti. Thanks for watching. Feel free to share this with all your friends and relatives, because this knowledge is pretty new. You couldn't find it in any religious text. God Himself comes and gives this knowledge. So rush to the nearest Raja Yoga meditation center or Google for the Murli. The knowledge given by God is called Murli. So Google for the Murli in your language and start listening to it without any further delay. Om Shanti. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet.